Welcome back to Moe's Minute. We are back here at Golden Gate Cemetery, and we're visiting the grave of Dan White. Now, I kind of vacillated on even doing this episode, because Dan White was kind of a murderer. But and then I ultimately decided that it was good to have his point of view, sort of, on what he did. Plus, he wasn't always a bad guy. Anyway, so Dan White was born in Long Beach on September 2nd, 1946. And he was, I believe, the second in 9 children. He grew up in a very large Irish-American family. When he was young, they moved here to San Francisco, and he grew up in the Visitation Valley. He even went to Reardon, but he was expelled as a junior for an incident of violence. I was not able to find out what that violent incident was. I feel like since he was a minor, the record is sealed. But he ended up graduating from, it's now the Philip and Sala Burton High School, but at the time it was the Woodrow Wilson High School. So after he graduated, he joined the military, and he went to Vietnam, and he served in the Army in the 101st Airborne, I believe, from 1969 to 1970. And he was honorably discharged in 1971. I believe he went to college before he joined the military. He's the same age as my parents, so he would have graduated in the class of 1964, or actually I think 1965, because I think he was held back because of that little thing of violence in Reardon. But he had still graduated a couple of years before he joined the military. I just don't know where he went to school, or maybe he didn't go to school. I'm not sure. Anyway, so he was honorably discharged in 1971. And he actually went to Alaska when he first left the military, when he first got back from Vietnam, and he was a security guard there. He made his way home to San Francisco, and he became a cop. I don't know why he left the police force. Rumor has it that it was because he reported another officer for beating a suspect who was in handcuffs. But Dan said himself that the reason he left was because he wanted to serve on the board of supervisors for the city of San Francisco. The little problem with that theory is, or with his own reasoning there, is that after he left the police force, he became a firefighter. He went from being a San Francisco cop to being a San Francisco firefighter. And he was well regarded as a firefighter because he saved a woman and baby from burning a 7-story building. But since he was a firefighter before running for board of supervisors, that calls his theory of why he left the police force into question. So yeah, don't know. And like I said, he was elected to the Board of Supervisors for District 8. At the time, he was a Democrat. He would later switch as he aligned more with the ideals of the Republican Party. But at the time of his election, he was originally a Democrat. But he was homophobic. And at the time, the rhetoric in San Francisco was not quite pro-homosexuality. Enter Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay politician elected in California history. Harvey Milk and Dan White were originally friends. Yes, they were originally friends. That did not last. Dan White invited Harvey Milk to his kid's baptism. And Dan White also recommended to Dianne Feinstein that Harvey Milk be appointed chairman of the Transportation Committee. But something happened. And the jury is still out on exactly what it was that kind of broke the relationship between these two men. There's a few different theories. One is that they definitely did not agree on an issue, but no one's quite sure what the issue was. And Dan and Harvey had originally agreed to vote the same way on this issue. And then Harvey Milk changed his vote at the last minute, and it pissed Dan White off. Now, from a friend point of view, that is kind of a sucky thing to do, but it's politics. And that just kind of happens in politics. But after that, they just continued to butt heads, and Dan White seems to be especially petty, and every time Harvey Milk was for an issue, he would vote against it. That may be around the time he started to identify as a Republican, but that also might have happened before. Not sure when that happened either. Some of the issues that they didn't agree on had to do with gay rights in the city. Harvey Milk fought for the Briggs Act, which allowed gay people to be employed in the school system. Dan White opposed it. Dan White also opposed a measure that would put a transitional high school or rehab facility in the Mission District. And Harvey Milk supported that. So they were just always at odds after that. In 1978 was a really horrible year for the city, just FYI. In 1978, Dan White decided that he wanted to resign from his seat because he wasn't making enough money. He tried to run a baked potato stand at Pier 39 to bring in more money. It was not exactly a moneymaker. So he decided to resign his seat from the Board of Supervisors. He said it was due to the salary, but honestly, it probably had more to do with the people on the supervisors, because he, like I said, appears to have been a pretty petty man. It was maybe a week after he put in his resignation that he changed his mind, and he asked Mayor Moscone if he could get his seat back. By all accounts, Moscone was actually going to give him his seat back, except Harvey Milk convinced him not to. And, like I said, Dan White was not only a petty man, but he was also bitter and held some grudges, it looks like. And so, on November 27th, 1978, he went to City Hall with his police-issued gun. He snuck in through a window in the basement, got past Moscone's secretary saying that he just wanted to talk to the mayor to try to get his seat back. When Mayor Moscone refused to reinstate him, he shot him. He then went down the hall to Harvey Milk's office and shot him. He immediately turned himself in. He went straight to the police department where he had once served, handing him his gun, and said that he shot Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk. And he had a team of very good lawyers who, even though the prosecution was going for at least murder one, he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The reason for this was because his lawyers argued that he was at a diminished capacity mentally because of a poor diet. He was depressed because he ate too many frickin' Twinkies. Now, let me explain that a bit. They argued that he was depressed because he ate bad food. The Twinkies is not necessarily what he ate, But that argument that got him out of the death penalty basically was called the Twinkie defects. Even today, it's known as the Twinkie defects. So Dan White served 5 years of the 7, and when he got out, Dianne Feinstein told him not to come back to the city because his life would be in danger. The night he killed Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone, but definitely Harvey Milk, changed everything in the city. Riots broke out because of what Harvey Milk meant to the people of San Francisco, to the gay community. There were riots when he got out of prison. And Dianne Feinstein said, yeah, you should stay put because you're probably going to get killed if you come back. So he went to LA for, I believe, a year. And then the guys in LA were like, yeah, you should probably go back to San Francisco. It appears his life wasn't really much safer in LA. So he went back to San Francisco and he lived paranoid for the next 2 years. He wouldn't go out unless it was under cover of darkness, and he didn't have a job, and he talked about moving to Ireland, but the move just didn't really happen, and riots were everywhere. Only a few people would talk to him. It was not the way for anybody to live. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but it's just not a life for anybody. And so 2 years after he got out of prison, he committed suicide by carbon monoxide. He locked himself in his running car in his garage, and he left behind a wife and 3 children. So that is the story of Dan White, who started out decently, I suppose, and then became a murderer. But I believe it is an important antithesis to the episode I have already done on Mayor Moscone that you might remember. So, yeah. Thank you.